A single faded frame, discovered in the attic of a ruined Virginia farmhouse in 1912, three figures, two men, one woman, stand unnervingly close, their faces blurred by the light of a cracked window. The photograph was never meant to be seen, and those who stumbled across it would later swear that when you stare too long, the woman seems to move, her mouth parting as though whispering something meant only for the dead. The locals never spoke openly of the Vega cousins. Their story passed only in fragments, half truths whispered over church pews or scrawled in the margins of forgotten diaries. A love triangle that was more than scandal, it was a curse. A chain of obsession and betrayal that did not end with death, but with something much older, much hungrier, binding them together forever. What happened on that farm between 1849 and 1851 is not taught in schools, nor recorded in clean history books. And yet, the ground itself remembers. Beneath its soil lie artifacts authorities refused to catalog, bones no coroner dared to name, and a record of ritual no church would ever claim. This is the story the town buried. This is the story the family erased, and tonight, it is the story we will exhume. The Vega cousins were born of a divided household. Their grandfather, a Spanish immigrant who fled Cuba after whispers of unholy rites in Havana, built the family farm on the edges of Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. He raised his children with an iron hand and stricter faith, but something always clung to the property, an air too heavy for the living, as if the earth itself had been scorched centuries before their arrival. By 1849, three cousins had come of age on that farm. Elias Vega, the eldest, a stoic and severe man with ambitions to inherit the land. Mateo Vega, younger by 2 years, gentle but consumed by envy. And Isabel Vega, a woman whose presence drew rooms into silence. Their bond was said to be inseparable, until affection turned into obsession and loyalty into betrayal. Neighbors began to notice changes, doors left open at night, lamps burning until morning, screams muffled in the distance, quickly swallowed by cicadas. The church warned against excessive intimacy, but the sermons came too late. By then, the triangle had already formed. A secret so corrosive it would infect not only the Vega line, but the very town around them. At first, their closeness seemed harmless. Isabel was often seen walking between her cousins in the fields, her arms linked with theirs. Elias, with his sharp jaw and unyielding posture, carried himself like a patriarch in training. Mateo, softer, almost delicate, lingered behind with an air of need. Yet Isabel's gaze drifted between them, never settling, always circling. By the summer of 1850, neighbors whispered that the Vega farm had become a house without walls. Isabel spent nights in Elias's quarters, then vanished before dawn to be seen entering Mateo's. No one spoke of it directly, but the town's pastor, Reverend Fletcher, began sermonizing on the sin of Cain, brothers destroyed by envy, a woman as their ruin. But this was no ordinary scandal. Visitors swore that when the three walked together, shadows clung unnaturally long at their feet, bending against the lantern light. Elias began keeping a journal, one later recovered in fragments, that spoke of a hunger Isabel carries, not her own, not of this world. Mateo scribbled poetry on the walls of the smokehouse, words no one could translate, save for one repeated phrase, forever bound. The love triangle wasn't simply flesh against flesh. Something older watched them, something waiting for the moment when desire tipped into devotion, and devotion into ruin. It was Isabel who found the well. Hidden beyond a collapsed barn, half swallowed by vines, it had been sealed by their grandfather decades earlier. She uncovered it in August of 1850. The cousins claimed she was drawn to it in a dream, hearing voices rising from beneath the soil calling her name. The well was lined not with stone but with charred brick, blackened as if scorched by fire. Carved symbols traced its mouth, worn down but still legible to anyone willing to study. Elias wanted it resealed immediately. Mateo argued it was a sign, a relic of the family's buried heritage. Isabel only smiled, saying the voices were lonely. That night, the cousins gathered there, witnesses, farmhands who later fled, reported strange chanting carried on the wind. Lamps extinguished themselves as though smothered by unseen hands, and when dawn broke, 3 sets of muddy footprints led from the well to the house, though none of the cousins recalled leaving it. Afterward, Isabel's behavior shifted. She hummed hymns that were not hymns, words without language. Elias wrote that her touch grew cold. Mateo dreamed of drowning in black water, Isabel's face hovering above him with lips that never opened. The well had been unsealed, and whatever lay beneath had already begun to seep into them. In November 1850, the first disappearance occurred. A farmhand named Joseph Pike failed to report for work. His bed was found neatly made, his boots placed by the door. Outside, the earth bore no tracks. Inside, the only clue was a lock of hair, long, dark, unmistakably Isabel's. Tucked beneath his pillow, the sheriff's men searched the woods for 3 days. No body was ever recovered. The town whispered that Joseph had fled, perhaps shamed by debts or some private sin. But others knew better. They had heard his voice in the tavern weeks prior, telling of the cousins' midnight gatherings. The way Isabel's laughter echoed too sweet, too sharp, like glass breaking inside the ear. Reverend Fletcher pressed the Vega family to account for Joseph's whereabouts. Elias denied everything, stone-faced. Mateo broke down in tears, swearing no harm had come to the boy. Isabel, however, smiled faintly and asked, "Would you like to see him again?" From that day, the Vega farm was regarded as a place of silence. Workers refused employment there. Neighbors crossed themselves when passing. Yet Fletcher would later admit in his private journal that he too felt a pull, an urge to step onto the farm after dark, as though something beneath the soil demanded witnesses. The Vega cousins had not merely lost a farmhand. They had crossed the invisible threshold between scandal and sacrilege. Weeks after Joseph Pike's disappearance, Elias began to write more feverishly. His journal, preserved in water-damaged fragments, reads like the unraveling of a mind caught between love and damnation. He confessed to hearing Isabel speak in her sleep, but not in her own voice. At times she called him by name, at others she used words Elias swore were older than Adam. One entry describes a gathering at the well. Isabel descended partway into its mouth, gripping the rope ladder as though drawn downward by invisible hands. Mateo clung to her waist, begging her to return. Elias stood frozen, convinced that if she vanished, the earth itself would seal over her. He wrote, "She belongs to something beyond us, but I cannot let go. If she is bound, then so am I. And if Mateo takes her, then let the fire swallow us all." The handwriting deteriorated over time, letters stretching into lines, words into spirals. Scholars later remarked the script resembled sigils used in Caribbean rites of the early 19th century. How Elias could have known them was never explained. By Christmas of 1850, Elias's final entry was scrawled in blood across 2 torn pages. "She has promised us eternity. We need only love her enough to die." By early 1851, Isabel was no longer the woman the town remembered. Her beauty, once radiant, took on an uncanny sharpness. Her cheeks grew pale, her lips bled at the corners as if kissed raw by unseen mouths. Yet her eyes, black as ink, held a fevered brilliance that unsettled everyone who met her gaze. Women whispered she was a witch. Men avoided her path in daylight, but Elias and Mateo seemed spellbound, orbiting her like planets around a dying sun. They stopped tending the farm, they stopped attending church. Even food rotted in the pantry while Isabel sat at the piano for hours, pressing the same 3 notes again and again until glass cracked in the window frames. Reverend Fletcher attempted intervention, gathering a small group of elders to confront the family. But when they arrived, Isabel herself answered the door, her hands slick with mud, her nails broken as though she had been digging. She only said, "He's almost here." The men left without a word, shaken by something they could not name. The cousins were no longer simply bound by lust. Isabel had become their axis, their priestess, their grave. In February 1851, a second soul vanished. This time it was Ruth Fletcher, the Reverend's niece, a girl of only 16. She had been seen near the Vega farm the night before, carrying a basket of bread her uncle insisted she deliver to the sick cousins. She never returned. Search parties combed the valley. Bloodhounds caught her scent, but led their handlers in circles around the Vega well before collapsing in fits, frothing at the mouth. No trace of Ruth was ever recovered. Only her basket found floating in the creek, its bread blackened as if burned. The town's fear turned to fury. Whispers rose of lynching, of burning the Vega farm to the ground, but Reverend Fletcher silenced them, claiming his niece's fate was God's punishment for her secret sins. Years later, his private notes revealed the truth. He dreamed of Ruth standing at the foot of his bed, smiling with Isabel's smile, whispering that she was happy now. 2 vanishings, 2 silences. The Vega farm had become a wound the valley could not close. After Ruth's disappearance, Shenandoah Valley split into 2 camps. Half the town demanded blood. They spoke of the Cousins as predators, seducers, even devils in human skin. The other half urged restraint, convinced the Vega family's curse was not to be provoked. Tension bled into daily life. Merchants refused to sell to the Vegas. Schoolchildren threw stones at the farmhouse. At night, strange fires were seen burning in the fields, always extinguished before anyone could reach them. Isabel began walking into town unescorted, smiling at strangers as though daring them to act. One man claimed she placed her hand on his chest and whispered his childhood sin, a secret no living soul should have known. Another swore he saw her reflection in the church's baptismal font, though she stood outside on the steps. Mateo, once the gentle one, grew gaunt, his skin marked with scratches no one could explain. Elias carried an axe wherever he went. And together the 3 began speaking openly of preparing for the binding, a phrase that filled their neighbors with dread. The town was no longer afraid of scandal, it was afraid of contagion, of a darkness spreading outward from the Vega farm like a rot. On the night of March 4, 1851, thunder shook the valley. Witnesses swore they saw lightning strike the Vega farmhouse again and again, though the structure never caught fire. Inside, the Cousins performed what would later be known only as the binding. According to Elias's fragmented journal, Isabel instructed them to draw symbols across the floorboards in ash and blood. At midnight, she ordered them to cut their palms and press the wounds together, forming a triangle of flesh and bone. As the storm raged, neighbors claimed to hear a chorus of voices rising from beneath the earth. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, crying out in agony. Dogs howled until their throats split. Infants screamed in their cradles. Lamps across the valley flickered and died. When dawn came, the storm vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The farm looked unchanged from the outside, but those who dared approach swore the windows had darkened, reflecting not the living but the dead. And from that day forward, the 3 cousins were never again seen apart. Wherever Isabel walked, Elias and Mateo followed, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, as though they had given something away in the night. By April of 1851, the church became the battlefield. Reverend Fletcher gathered his congregation to pray against the Vega evil, but the prayers never reached heaven. Witnesses said the air thickened, heavy with a rancid sweetness, as though the pews themselves were sweating rot. The baptismal font filled not with water but with something black, viscous, and clotted. Candles sputtered out one by one. A woman screamed as her child convulsed in her arms, his small hands forming symbols in the air no one recognized. And over it all, a sound, soft at first, then deafening, Isabel's laugh echoing through the rafters though she was nowhere inside. The congregation scattered. Some swore off worship entirely, claiming God had abandoned them. Others turned their anger outward, demanding the cousins be exiled or worse. Fletcher himself retreated into silence, recording only in his diary, "She has found her way into the house of God. The doors are open. They will never close." In May, a boy named Samuel Carter vanished while playing near the Vega property. His parents searched frantically, only to find him 2 days later, standing barefoot in the middle of a cornfield, eyes wide, skin pale as milk. When questioned, Samuel said he had been with the cousins. He described Isabel as the mother of the well, and claimed she promised him a crown made of sleep. His hands were raw, as though he had been digging. When pressed further, the boy only repeated one phrase over and over: "We are together forever. We are together forever." The Carters fled the valley within the week, leaving their home, their fields, and their kin behind. Their sudden departure became a contagion in itself. Other families soon followed, fearing their children might be next. By midsummer, half the valley lay abandoned, its houses silent, its farms overgrown. The Vega cousins had not only cursed themselves, they were draining life from everything around them. June 1851, the valley could no longer bear its silence. A mob gathered, torches in hand, to march on the Vega farm. They came not in anger but in desperation, praying that fire might cleanse what faith and law could not. But when they reached the property, they found Elias waiting with his axe, Mateo clutching a rusted rifle, and Isabel standing between them, barefoot, her white dress stained with mud and blood. Witnesses swore her eyes glowed in the firelight, reflecting the mob back at themselves, twisted and skeletal. The crowd faltered, torches were dropped, some fled outright. Those who remained claimed they could not move, their bodies frozen as Isabel whispered, "Lay them down, lay them all down." A half-dozen men collapsed in the dirt, writhing as though their bones were snapping one by one. The mob broke. The survivors carried nothing home but their terror. From that night on, no one dared approach the Vega property again. It was no longer a farmhouse. It was a temple. Reverend Fletcher, once the valley's voice of God, unraveled in the weeks after the revolt. He stopped preaching. He stopped eating. Parishioners found him kneeling alone in the church at midnight, whispering Isabel's name into the shadows. On July 3rd he vanished. In his abandoned parsonage they found only one thing, a single page torn from his Bible, the ink smeared into a sentence barely legible, "And the two shall become one flesh, and the third shall bind them." Days later, children swore they saw Fletcher wandering the Vega fields at dawn, naked, his skin blackened as though burned, his mouth moving in silent prayer. Adults dismissed the stories, but none dared investigate. The church had fallen, the law had retreated, the town had fled, and yet the cousins remained. Bound to each other, bound to Isabel, bound to the thing beneath the well. August 1851 was the hottest month the valley had ever endured. Crops withered, livestock perished, and wells across the county turned foul. Only the Vega farm seemed untouched. Its corn stood unnaturally tall, its fields green as though watered by something other than rain. One desperate farmer, Henry Lowe, stole into the property at night to cut what he could. His wife reported he never returned. At dawn, she found his body dangling from the Vega scarecrow, throat slit, his blood soaking the roots of corn that swayed though no wind blew. That harvest was the cousins' last. They no longer ate, villagers said. No smoke rose from their chimney, no bread baked in their oven, yet their bodies did not wither. Isabel's cheeks flushed as though she drank sunlight itself. Elias and Mateo grew gaunt but gleamed with a feverish energy as though hunger itself had been banished from them. The farm was alive, but fed by death. On September 9th, the cousins sealed their fate. They called it the wedding. Some say it was a marriage. Others claim it was a pact. All agree it took place at the well. Neighbors reported music drifting through the valley, violins and bells, though no one was seen playing. Lights glowed above the farm, not lanterns but spheres that pulsed like beating hearts. Those who peered through the tree lines swore they saw Isabel in a white gown, her cousins kneeling before her, both crowned with wreaths of bone. Then came the voices, 1,000 layered tongues chanting, drowning out the wind, the crickets, even the thunder. The ground shook as though hollow. One witness claimed the well yawned open wider than the house itself, swallowing shadows that clawed and writhed like the damned. At midnight, a scream split the valley, not of pain, but of consummation. The wedding was done. 3 days later, the farmhouse went silent. No lanterns, no sound, just stillness. A farm boy dared approach. Through the window, he saw Isabel seated at the table, Elias and Mateo on either side. Their hands were joined, their eyes open yet unblinking. Before them lay a knife, still wet, and 3 bowls filled not with food, but with something red and steaming. When men returned to investigate, the house was empty. No bodies, no blood. Only the bowls remained bone, dry, their insides carved with symbols no scholar has since translated. Upstairs, Elias's journal lay open to the final page. We are together now. We are forever. No grave was dug. No coffins carried. The cousins had vanished, not fled, but absorbed. The well was resealed the following week, but the earth never closed. By winter, Shenandoah Valley was a ghost. The remaining families fled, leaving behind houses with doors ajar, tables still set with uneaten bread, cradles rocking though no infants lay within, fields grew wild, roads disappeared beneath weeds. Travelers avoided the region, maps erased it. Government records list it as uninhabitable soil, though no blight or disaster was ever confirmed. By 1860, the valley was forgotten entirely, swallowed by time as though it had never existed. Yet those who strayed too near claimed otherwise. Hunters found themselves circling the same grove until night fell. Soldiers marching through during the Civil War reported hearing wedding bells at midnight, long after the valley had been abandoned. One diary, penned by a Union deserter, describes seeing 3 figures walking the fields. 2 men and a woman, hand in hand, their shadows stretching miles across the ground. The land was empty, but it was not unoccupied. In 1912, the farmhouse was rediscovered. A crew hired to clear the land stumbled upon it, still standing though warped by age. Inside, the walls bore scorch marks that looked less like fire and more like hands pressing outward. It was there the photograph was found, 3 figures blurred standing in the parlor window, 2 men, 1 woman. No camera was recorded in the valley before 1851, yet experts confirmed the plate was genuine, predating even the earliest Virginia daguerreotypes. When projected in light, witnesses claimed the image moved. The woman's lips parted. Her hand shifted ever so slightly as though beckoning the viewer closer. 1 man fainted. Another clawed his own eyes, screaming that he had seen the well. The photograph was locked away in Richmond, never displayed again. Its current location is unknown. Some say it remains sealed in a private archive. Others insist it was destroyed. But the whispers persist, that anyone who gazes long enough will hear Isabel's voice, promising them eternity. Today, the story of the Vega cousins is absent from history books, erased from county records, denied by every institution meant to preserve memory. But silence speaks, and the soil remembers. Descendants of neighboring families swear the curse lingers in their bloodlines, dreams of drowning in black water, of wedding bells tolling at night, of hands pulling them toward a mouth in the earth. Hikers who trespass into the forgotten valley report strange music, crops growing in perfect rings, and shadows that stretch against the sun. What was the Vega Triangle? A scandal of forbidden love, a pact with something older than the church? Or proof that devotion, when corrupted, can bind not only flesh but eternity itself? Perhaps the truest answer lies in Isabel's promise, written in Elias's final hand. We are together now. We are forever. And if you listen closely on certain nights, when the wind dies and the fields fall still, you might hear 3 voices rising from beneath the soil, bound by love, bound by death, bound by the well.